So this is a pretty embarrassing story to tell. And I've not told it to many people, but essentially I went through 2 months in my business where I lost about 70 grand. And obviously that's a lot of money. But I was thinking last night when I was actually lying in bed, I should probably tell this story because there's probably a few people who are also starting the business or, making some good progress with the business who might learn from this and it might prevent it from happening to them. So essentially what happened is I lost about 70 grand in my business because I stopped believing in myself. Now, just prior to this period, I was having one of the best times ever in my business, in fact. And what actually happened was things were really coming full circle. The work I'd put in over the previous year was really coming together. And if you've ever watched any of my previous videos, you'll know I like to talk about like the compounding effect and how time with a lot of effort ends up with really good results. And it's kind of like this curve here, you go along, you don't get any results, and then suddenly you go boom, you get loads of results. And what was happening, I'd done this business for a few years at this point and things were starting to catch up and the hard work was finally starting to pay off. So good, in fact, I booked like the record number of calls for my business I had actually done. And I'd done it all manually. As you know, I run a business which helps entrepreneurs book more calls with LinkedIn. Basically what happened was people who I'd spoken to over the last year were suddenly reaching out. They all wanted to jump on a call with me. My content was really taking off. People were like, wow, this is really good. In the communities that I'm in, people were like, oh, have you heard of this Rob guy? He's doing really good. And obviously I'm still doing my daily consistent actions and daily consistent effort as well. And I was like, wow, I could be on for record months here. It could be, about to do amazing and do the best I've ever done. What actually happened was I actually did the worst I'd ever done. How funny is that, right? And basically what happened was I had all these calls booked and all these people really interested in working with me. And when I picked up the phone to them to see if they wanted to be part of my coaching program, all I heard was no after no after no after no after no after no. And it didn't make any sense. Like the numbers didn't make any sense. If you guys ever experienced anything with sales, you'll know that, if you're tracking your numbers, you should be able to basically close a certain number of people out of the portion of people, right? You should be able to like close a slice of the cake, in other words. And basically it just didn't happen. It was just no after no after no. And I was like, what is going on? And I sat down and I worked out the value of the people I should have converted into my program. It was about 70 grand and this was in roughly about 60 days, right? 45 to 60 days. And I just didn't have anything to show for it, right? Basically, I was so like down on myself that I actually went into one of the groups that I'm a part of, like it's a bit of a mastermind for people who are kind of at my level. And I said like, look, this problem, I was like, I don't know what's going on. Has anyone experienced this? Has anyone got any tips or anything like this? And this guy reached out to me. There's a few people who reached out to me, but this guy in particular, he was like, hey, we've got an extensive career in sales. Let me phone you. Let me speak on the phone to you. And I was like, you know what? I don't know this guy, but I sometimes reach out to other people and I feel like it's good karma coming around that somebody might be able to help me as well. Anyway, so I was speaking to this guy over the phone. He was nice enough to, make contact with me. And it turns out that this guy has like several 7-figure businesses. He's built them all up from scratch. The guy's been, crushed multiple times by multiple different events and in his life. And basically he's just bounced back again and again and again. And he has built 7-figure businesses. And I was chatting to him and I was hearing his story and I was like, wow, that's an amazing story. But basically, sometimes you need a third person or, a person who's external to yourself to be able to look at your situation and say, I know exactly what you're doing wrong. And it's kind of like how sometimes you can give your friends really good advice or, you know, maybe your partner, or you give your family members really, really good advice. You just see their situation so clearly. You see what the problem is so clearly for them. But unfortunately, those skills don't pass on to yourself sometimes, and you can literally be blind because you're too like emotionally involved in what's going on. So basically, this exact scenario would happen to me. And I was talking through this guy about what was going on. And he said to me, you've lost like your ability to commit. And he just gave me one simple technique on this. He said that like you've lost your ability to commit. And he was like, why have you lost your ability to commit? Why have you done this? And I was like, I've just, I'd had like some personal thing going on in my life as well. And sometimes this was a big lesson for business, is that sometimes like you have like something personal go on outside of work, but no matter how much you try and keep it away from work, you end up dragging it in as well. And what happens is suddenly then you have a bad day in your work or your business or whatever, and you can't like make the connection about what's happening and why it's happening and how you've ended up in this situation, right? And I won't ever forget what he said, but basically he said to me, you're gonna have to release your attachment to the outcome. I was like, what do you mean release your attachment to the outcome? He says, this is a whole of a process game. You should be concentrating on putting one step in front of the other and basically stepping away from how you think the call is gonna go. And I was like, oh, all right, well, how do you do that? And he says, whenever you're doing an important activity, whether it's something in your business, whether it's something in your life as well, whether you're going to have a serious conversation with someone, whether, you know, you are really concentrating on maybe like your health or something like that. He says, before you go and do this thing, you should always take 5 minutes to yourself. Sit in a room quietly with nothing but you, your computer, if that's what you're using, or your phone or whatever, and just sit there and just concentrate on leaving everything outside of the room, like emotionally and mentally. And basically when you do this, you give yourself permission to just be in the moment. So I was like, wow, that's so cool. And I implemented this after a long conversation. You know, I'm friends with the guy now, even though we just kind of touched base. But he was saying this is a technique that he's always used. And when he had really, really bad times in his life, when he had to be really, really resilient, he had to leave all of the baggage. He could only be successful when he's left all of his baggage outside of the room, right? He's, you know, put it in a box somewhere, locked up while he takes care of business. And he can unpack that box or, you know, open the door and let it back in the room when, you know, life's going back on as normal. When he needs to focus, he needs to release the attachment to the outcome. So basically I started implementing this in different areas of my business. My sales all skyrocketed. I started putting this in, you know, in areas of my personal life as well. I took like a minute to myself to just leave any baggage, just not let anything blend together, because if you're constantly focused on the outcome, it's kind of like one of those dreams, you know, a dream if you're running and when you're trying to run in your dream, but it feels like your legs are actually stuck in quicksand. And that's the kind of the same thing which happens when you focus on the outcome. You should always be focused on the process. And he actually gave a really good analogy of like how this works, a really good example of how this works. And basically he said that mountain climbers, you know, like professional mountain climbers, they never focus on the peak of the mountain. They never focus on the area they've got to get to. All they are focused on is putting one foot in front of the other until they make it to the top. They just repeat that action until they've made it to the top. Now, how interesting is that, right? Always be releasing your attachment to the outcome, or at least trying to. When I started to do this, it actually took a bit of practice to do. But now before I film like any video, I always make sure to sit down and be like, what am I going to talk about? And get it clear in my head and be like, you know, like breathe deep, like leave it all outside the room. If you had like a good day, a bad day, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what's here and now. The outcome doesn't matter, only the process matters. So I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I hope it really helps someone out there. Let me know in the comments if you like content like this. Your feedback is what basically I make my next content on, so it's always very useful for me. Hope you're doing fantastic, guys, and take care until next time.